The moment I walked into that gleaming corporate office with my lawyer and accountant flanking me like bodyguards, every conversation stopped. My son-in-law's face went white as fresh snow, and his confident smirk melted faster than ice cream on hot pavement. For 6 months, he'd been telling everyone that 73-year-old Margaret Thompson was losing her mind, that I couldn't manage my own finances anymore. What he didn't know was that I'd been 3 steps ahead of him the entire time, carefully documenting every lie, every manipulation, every dollar he'd stolen from my accounts. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 73 years old, I've weathered more storms than most people twice my age. I built a successful catering business from scratch in the heart of Denver, Colorado, raised 2 daughters as a single mother after my husband passed away when I was just 45, and accumulated a comfortable nest egg of $850,000 through decades of careful saving and smart investments. My mind is as sharp as the day I graduated summa cum laude from Colorado State University, with a degree in business administration. Though my son-in-law would have you believe otherwise, the stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about money, though losing nearly $100,000 would certainly hurt. This was about my dignity, my independence, and my right to control my own life. When someone tries to paint you as mentally incompetent, they're not just stealing your wealth, they're stealing your identity, your agency, and your future. Every senior citizen in America faces this vulnerability, and I was determined not to become another statistic. 6 months earlier, everything seemed perfect in my well-ordered world. I lived in the same brick colonial house in the Highlands neighborhood, where I'd raised my girls, kept my business running smoothly, even in semi-retirement, and enjoyed regular Sunday dinners with my family. My daughter Sarah had married Derek Chen 3 years prior, and while I'd had my reservations about his flashy lifestyle and expensive tastes, I genuinely wanted to welcome him into our close-knit family. If you're enjoying this story and finding value in these life lessons, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, give this video a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments about your own experiences with family challenges. Life in the Thompson household had settled into a comfortable rhythm by the spring of 2023. Every morning at 6:30 sharp, I would brew my first cup of coffee in the same ceramic mug my late husband Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary, settle into my favorite armchair by the kitchen window, and review the previous day's business receipts from Thompson's Catering. Even though I'd handed over most of the day-to-day operations to my younger daughter Lisa, I still maintained oversight of the books and handled our most important clients personally. My routine was methodical, built on 50 years of discipline and attention to detail. After breakfast, I'd walk 3 miles through the tree-lined streets of my neighborhood, stopping to chat with neighbors who'd become friends over the decades. Mrs. Patterson, my 80-year-old neighbor, would always wave from her garden, and we'd discuss everything from her prized roses to the latest neighborhood gossip. These interactions weren't just pleasantries. They were proof of my mental acuity and social engagement. Though I had no idea how important that evidence would soon become, the catering business had been my lifeline after Robert's sudden heart attack left me widowed with 2 teenage daughters and a mountain of medical bills. Starting with just $500 and a determination to provide for my family, I'd built Thompson's Catering into Denver's premier event planning service. We handled everything from intimate dinner parties in Cherry Creek to massive corporate events at the convention center, employing 15 full-time staff and generating annual revenues of over $2 million. My financial habits were as disciplined as my morning routine. Every Friday, I would sit at the mahogany desk in my home office, the same one where I'd balance checkbooks and plan budgets for 3 decades, and review all my accounts with the precision of a forensic accountant. My investment portfolio, managed through Denver Community Bank, where I'd maintained relationships for over 20 years, was conservatively allocated across blue-chip stocks, municipal bonds, and certificates of deposit. The $850,000 I'd accumulated represented not just financial security, but the embodiment of a lifetime's worth of sacrifice, smart decisions, and relentless hard work. Sarah, my eldest daughter, had always been the more social of my 2 girls. Where Lisa inherited my practical nature and business acumen, Sarah was drawn to the excitement of new experiences and charismatic personalities. At 32, She worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized pharmaceutical company, earned a respectable salary, but had never shown much interest in financial planning or long-term security. When she met Derek Chen at a charity fundraiser in downtown Denver, she was immediately swept off her feet by his confidence, his expensive suits, and his promises of adventures around the world. Derek was 35, stood about 6 feet tall with an athletic build maintained through expensive gym memberships, and possessed the kind of smooth charm that could sell ice to Eskimos. His thick black hair was always perfectly styled, and he never appeared in public without designer clothing that probably cost more than most people spent on rent. He worked as a commercial real estate agent for a high-end firm in the tech center, drove a leased BMW convertible, and lived in a luxury apartment overlooking the South Platte River. From the beginning, I sensed something calculating beneath Derek's polished exterior. During our first family dinner, while Sarah hung on his every word, I noticed how his eyes constantly assessed everything in my home, from the antique furniture to the original artwork I'd collected over the years. When the conversation turned to family history, he asked pointed questions about my late husband's insurance policies and my business's financial performance. These weren't the curious inquiries of someone wanting to know his future in-laws better. They were the probing questions of someone conducting an informal audit. But love, as I'd learned from my own marriage to Robert, has a way of blinding us to red flags that seem obvious in retrospect. Sarah was happier than I'd seen her in years, and when Derek proposed during a weekend trip to Aspen 6 months after they met, I pushed aside my concerns and focused on supporting my daughter's joy. The wedding, held at the Brown Palace Hotel with 200 guests, cost $45,000, an amount that Derek insisted was an investment in our future, while subtly suggesting that I could afford to be generous with my successful daughter. The first year of their marriage passed without major incident. Derek was charming during family gatherings, remembered birthdays and anniversaries, and even helped me modernize some of Thompson's catering's marketing strategies through his connections in the business community. Occasionally, he would make comments about my old-fashioned approach to money management, suggesting that I was missing out on incredible opportunities by keeping so much money in low-yield investments. I politely deflected these suggestions, explaining that my conservative approach had served me well through multiple economic downturns. Lisa, meanwhile, had grown into an exceptional business manager who shared my passion for culinary excellence and attention to detail. At 29, she possessed a combination of creativity and pragmatism that reminded me of myself at her age. Her auburn hair was usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her warm brown eyes lit up when she discussed new menu ideas or strategies for expanding our client base. Unlike her sister, Lisa had immediately distrusted Derek, though she kept her concerns private out of respect for Sarah's happiness. The cracks in the facade began to appear in subtle ways during the second year of Derek and Sarah's marriage. Derek's BMW was replaced by an even more expensive Tesla, and their modest apartment was upgraded to a 2-bedroom penthouse with monthly rent that exceeded many people's annual salaries. When I casually asked Sarah how they were managing such lifestyle inflation, she mentioned that Derek was killing it with commercial real estate deals and that they were living their best life. But I noticed that Sarah had stopped contributing to her retirement account and had begun carrying credit card debt for the first time in her adult life. During Sunday dinners, Derek's behavior became increasingly presumptuous. He would arrive wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, regale us with stories of expensive restaurants and luxury vacations, and drop hints about his sophisticated understanding of wealth management. When I mentioned routine maintenance on my house or my car, he would shake his head sympathetically and suggest that I was throwing good money after bad by maintaining depreciating assets instead of liquidating them for growth opportunities. The pivotal moment came on a crisp October evening in 2023, during what would be our last peaceful family gathering. We were sitting around my dining room table, the same one where I'd served thousands of meals to my daughters throughout their childhood, when Derek casually mentioned that Sarah had given him power of attorney over some of her financial accounts for convenience. Lisa and I exchanged glances, but before either of us could respond, Derek had smoothly changed the subject to his latest major deal that would set them up for life. That night, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my kitchen nursing a cup of chamomile tea and feeling an unsettling combination of concern and intuition. Over the decades of building my business and raising my daughters alone, I'd developed a finely tuned sense for people's motivations. Derek's behavior patterns, his increasing financial boldness, and his subtle attempts to position himself as the family's financial advisor all pointed towards something that made my stomach clench with worry. The following week, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the months ahead. During my regular appointment with James Morrison, my accountant of 15 years, I mentioned my concerns about Derek's influence on Sarah and asked him to help me organize all my financial records in a more accessible format. James, a methodical man in his 60s who'd helped me navigate everything from business expansions to tax audits, listened carefully and suggested that we also document the current state of all my accounts with detailed statements and photographs. Looking back, that conversation with James was the first domino in a chain of events that would ultimately expose Derek's true nature. But at the time, I simply felt like a protective mother taking reasonable precautions. I had no idea that within 2 months, Derek would launch a campaign designed to systematically destroy my reputation, steal my money, and rob me of my independence. The storm was gathering, and I was about to learn just how far someone will go when they mistake kindness for weakness and age for vulnerability. The first sign of trouble came on a snowy December morning when my bank called to verify an unusual transaction on my primary checking account. Sandra Williams, the branch manager I'd known for over a decade, explained that someone had attempted to transfer $15,000 to an account I didn't recognize. The transaction had been flagged by their fraud prevention system, but Sandra wanted to confirm that I hadn't authorized any large transfers recently. My blood ran cold as I stared at the phone in my kitchen, the morning coffee suddenly tasting bitter in my mouth. I assured Sandra that I had absolutely not authorized any such transfer and asked her to immediately freeze all external access to my accounts while I investigated. As I hung up the phone, my hands were shaking not from age or infirmity, but from the terrifying realization that someone had attempted to steal a significant amount of money from me. Within 2 hours, I was sitting in Sandra's office at Denver Community Bank, reviewing detailed transaction records that painted a disturbing picture. Over the previous 6 weeks, there had been multiple attempts to access my accounts using what appeared to be legitimate authorization codes. The attempted transfer wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a systematic effort to gain control of my finances. Most chilling of all, the attempts seemed to coincide with family gatherings where Derek would have had access to personal information. About my banking relationships, Sandra's expression was grave as she explained the bank's findings. Mrs. Thompson, whoever is trying to access your accounts has detailed knowledge of your banking history, your account numbers, and even some of your security questions. This isn't a random fraud attempt. This appears to be someone who has intimate access to your personal information. The implication hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. That evening, I called Sarah to discuss the situation, hoping against hope that there was some innocent explanation for what appeared to be a targeted attack on my financial security. Sarah's response sent ice water through my veins. Instead of expressing concern or outrage on my behalf, she seemed defensive and evasive. When I mentioned the specific timing of the access attempts, she quickly changed the subject and suggested that I was probably just confused about dates because older people sometimes get mixed up about financial details. The comment hit me like a physical blow. My own daughter, the child I'd raised to value honesty and integrity above all else, was suggesting that I was mentally incompetent. More disturbing still, her phrasing sounded rehearsed, as if she'd been coached to respond to my concerns with dismissive language about my cognitive abilities. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the possibility that my son-in-law was not only trying to steal from me, but had also manipulated my daughter into questioning my mental faculties. The next few days brought a series of increasingly alarming developments. During a routine grocery shopping trip, Nancy Peterson, the cashier I'd known for years, mentioned that Derek had been in the store asking questions about my shopping habits. He had claimed to be concerned about my increasing forgetfulness and wanted to know if I'd seemed confused or disoriented during recent visits. Nancy, bless her heart, had found his questions strange and told him that I seemed as sharp as ever, but the interaction left me deeply unsettled. Similar reports began filtering in from around my neighborhood and social circles. Derek had apparently been conducting what could only be described as a whispering campaign, expressing concern about my mental state to anyone who knew me well. He told my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, that he was worried about me driving at my age. He mentioned to the owner of my favorite restaurant that Sarah was concerned about my ability to manage my finances. Each conversation was carefully crafted to plant seeds of doubt about my competency while positioning him as the caring son-in-law just looking out for my well-being. The strategy was diabolically clever. By expressing concern rather than making direct accusations, Derek appeared compassionate and responsible while systematically undermining my reputation in the community. People who had known me for decades began second-guessing their own observations, wondering if they had missed signs of decline in someone they cared about. The doubt he was spreading created a perfect environment for future manipulation. But if Derek thought he was dealing with some doddering old woman who would meekly accept his gaslighting, he had severely underestimated his opponent. I had not survived the death of my husband, built a successful business from nothing, and raised 2 daughters alone by being passive or naive. Every instinct honed through decades of dealing with difficult customers, demanding vendors, and challenging business situations told me that I was under attack and needed to respond strategically. My first priority was documenting everything. I began keeping a detailed journal of every interaction, every conversation, and every unusual occurrence. When Derek made comments during family dinners about my forgetfulness, I wrote down his exact words. When Sarah repeated his concerns about my driving or my financial management, I recorded those conversations too. I photographed every document, every bank statement, and every piece of correspondence related to my finances. James Morrison, my accountant, became my crucial ally during this period. When I explained the situation to him, his face hardened with the kind of anger reserved for people who prey on vulnerable populations. James had worked with dozens of elderly clients over the years and had seen firsthand how financial abuse typically unfolds. He immediately suggested that we conduct a comprehensive audit of all my accounts and create an ironclad paper trail documenting my mental competency. The audit revealed the full scope of Derek's activities. Beyond the attempted transfer that had triggered the bank's fraud alert, there had been numerous smaller probes into my financial accounts. Someone had called my investment advisor, claiming to be calling on my behalf to discuss concerns about Margaret's recent confusion. There had been inquiries to my insurance company about policies that Derek shouldn't have known existed. Most disturbing of all, someone had contacted the Colorado Department of Human Services to file an anonymous report expressing concern about an elderly woman who might be showing signs of dementia. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, my physician of 20 years, was incredulous when I explained the situation during an emergency appointment. After conducting a thorough cognitive assessment that included memory tests, problem-solving exercises, and a detailed review of my medical history, she provided me with a comprehensive letter documenting my excellent mental health. "Margaret," she said, shaking her head in disbelief, "you're sharper than patients half your age. Anyone suggesting you're mentally incompetent is either delusional or deliberately lying." Armed with Dr. Harper's assessment and James's financial audit, I felt ready to confront Derek directly. I arranged a family dinner for the following Sunday, planning to present my evidence and demand an explanation for his activities. I spent the week preparing my presentation, organizing documents, and rehearsing exactly what I would say. I was nervous, but confident that once the truth was laid bare, even Sarah would have to acknowledge what was happening. That Sunday dinner became one of the most painful experiences of my life. When I presented my evidence, Derek's response was masterful in its calculated cruelty. Instead of denying the accusations, he expressed deep sadness about my increasing paranoia and suggested that my conspiracy theories were actually symptoms of early-stage dementia. He spoke in the concerned, patronizing tone typically reserved for small children or hospital patients, explaining that false accusations against family members were classic signs of cognitive decline in elderly individuals. Sarah's reaction was even more devastating. Rather than defending me or demanding answers from her husband, she sided with Derek completely. She suggested that I was obviously overwhelmed by managing my finances, and that it would be better for everyone if I accepted help from people who understand modern financial management. When I protested that I had documentation proving Derek's deceptive behavior, Sarah gently but firmly suggested that I was seeing patterns that aren't really there. The evening ended with Derek and Sarah presenting what they called a solution to my problems. They had already consulted with an elder law attorney about establishing a conservatorship that would transfer control of my finances to Derek as the responsible family member best qualified to manage my affairs. They presented this not as a hostile takeover, but as a loving intervention designed to protect me from my own declining capabilities. I left that dinner feeling more alone and vulnerable than at any point since Robert's death. My own daughter had been turned against me. My community was being systematically poisoned with doubts about my competency, and a predator was circling my life savings with legal tools designed to strip away my autonomy. For the first time in decades, I felt truly helpless. That night, I sat in my kitchen with a bottle of wine and seriously considered whether Derek might be right about my mental state. Was I imagining threats that didn't exist? Had I misinterpreted innocent inquiries as malicious attacks? The doubt felt like poison seeping through my veins, and I understood how elder abuse victims often end up questioning their own perceptions when faced with sustained gaslighting from people they trust. But something deep inside me, the same inner strength that had carried me through widowhood and single motherhood, refused to accept Derek's narrative. I might be 73 years old, but I was not weak, confused, or incompetent. If Derek wanted a fight, he was about to discover that Margaret Thompson had never backed down from a challenge in her life. The gloves were coming off, and I was prepared to fight for everything I had built and everything I represented. The next 3 months became a nightmare of systematic isolation and psychological warfare that tested every ounce of strength and resilience I had developed over 7 decades of life. Derek's campaign against me intensified dramatically after our confrontational family dinner, evolving from subtle manipulation to an all-out assault on my reputation, my relationships, and my sanity. Within 2 weeks of that disastrous Sunday evening, I discovered that Derek had escalated his efforts far beyond anything I had imagined possible. Using his position as Sarah's husband and his charismatic personality, he had convinced my younger daughter Lisa to meet with him privately to discuss their shared concerns about my mental health. When Lisa called to tell me about their conversation, her voice was heavy with worry and confusion. "Mom," Lisa said, her usual confidence replaced by uncertainty. "Derek showed me some things that really concerned me. He has photographs of checks you supposedly wrote to fake charities, bank statements showing erratic spending patterns, and even recordings of conversations where you sound confused and disoriented." My heart sank as I realized that Derek had somehow fabricated evidence designed to support his claims about my incompetence. The recordings were particularly devastating because they captured real conversations we'd had during family gatherings, but they had been edited to remove context and string together fragments that made me sound confused or repetitive. A discussion about different investment strategies was edited to make it seem like I couldn't remember basic financial concepts. A conversation about family memories was manipulated to suggest that I was having trouble distinguishing between past and present events. Even more insidious were the fabricated bank statements that Derek had created using sophisticated computer software. These fake documents showed a pattern of unusual spending that could be interpreted as evidence of cognitive decline, purchases that I had never made to organizations I had never heard of. The forgeries were professional quality, complete with authentic-looking bank logos and account numbers that matched my real accounts. Lisa, despite her initial skepticism about Derek, found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about my mental state. The manufactured evidence was compelling, and Derek had presented it with the kind of concerned, reluctant sadness that made his accusations seem credible. When Lisa asked me to explain the discrepancies, I realized that I was in the impossible position of trying to prove that fabricated evidence was false without sounding defensive or paranoid. My social isolation deepened as Derek's whisper campaign reached every corner of my community. Mary Henderson, who had been my closest friend for over 15 years, stopped returning my phone calls after Derek approached her at the grocery store with expressions of concern about my increasing instability. The volunteer coordinator at my church gently suggested that I might want to take a break from my weekly commitments until I was feeling more like myself again. Most painfully, several of my longtime catering clients began canceling contracts, citing concerns about my ability to manage large events reliably. Derek had somehow contacted them, presenting himself as a family member who felt obligated to warn them about my declining capabilities before they entrusted me with important celebrations. Watching the business I had built over decades crumble because of deliberate sabotage was like watching my life's work being systematically destroyed. The psychological toll was enormous. I began second-guessing every decision, every conversation, every interaction. When I forgot where I had placed my car keys, I wondered if it was normal absent-mindedness or a sign that Derek was right about my declining mental faculties. When I struggled to remember a neighbor's grandchild's name, I questioned whether my memory was actually failing. The constant gaslighting created a state of chronic self-doubt that affected every aspect of my daily life. Sleep became elusive as I lay awake night after night, replaying conversations and analyzing my own behavior for signs of the mental decline that Derek claimed to observe. My appetite diminished, and I lost nearly 15 pounds over the course of 2 months. The stress manifested in physical symptoms that, ironically, could be interpreted as evidence supporting Derek's claims about my deteriorating health. The legal pressure intensified when Derek hired Patricia Morrison, one of Denver's most prominent elder law attorneys, to begin formal conservatorship proceedings. The petition filed with the court painted a devastating portrait of a once capable woman whose cognitive decline posed a danger to herself and her financial security. Derek had carefully documented every instance of concerning behavior, every confused conversation, and every poor financial decision to build a legal case for removing my autonomy. The court-ordered psychological evaluation was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in March, and I spent the preceding week in a state of terror unlike anything I had ever experienced. Dr. Sarah Chen, the court-appointed psychologist, would have the power to determine whether I retained control over my own life or whether Derek's accusations were valid. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, and everything I represented hung in the balance of a single assessment. The evaluation took place in a sterile office building downtown, and from the moment I walked into Dr. Chen's waiting room, I felt like a prisoner awaiting sentencing. The psychologist was a stern woman in her 50s who approached the assessment with clinical detachment that made me feel more like a laboratory specimen than a human being with rights and dignity. For 3 hours, I was subjected to cognitive tests, memory exercises, and psychological interviews designed to assess my mental competency. Despite my terror, I performed well on the objective measures of cognitive function. My memory was excellent, my problem-solving abilities were sharp, and my understanding of financial concepts was sophisticated. But Dr. Chen also interviewed Derek and Sarah, and their presentations of evidence about my declining capabilities created a complex picture that she would need weeks to analyze and interpret. The waiting period after the evaluation was perhaps the darkest time of my entire life. I felt completely powerless, suspended in a legal limbo where my fate was being decided by strangers who knew nothing about my history, my character, or my capabilities. Every phone call could bring news that my independence had been legally terminated. Every knock at the door could be officials coming to escort me to a care facility chosen by Derek. During this period, I experienced something that I can only describe as an existential crisis. I began to question not just my mental capabilities, but my entire sense of self-worth and purpose. Was I really the strong, independent woman I had always believed myself to be? Or was I a delusional old lady clinging to illusions of competence? Had my confidence been nothing more than stubborn pride that blinded me to my own limitations? The lowest point came on a rainy Thursday evening in late March when I received a phone call from Lisa. Through tears, she explained that she had decided to support Derek's conservatorship petition because she believed it was the loving thing to do for a mother who was no longer capable of making good decisions. Hearing my younger daughter, the child who had inherited my business acumen and practical wisdom, express doubt about my competency felt like being stabbed in the heart by someone I trusted completely. That night, I sat in my darkened living room surrounded by photo albums and mementos from a lifetime of achievements, wondering if Derek had already won. My reputation was in ruins, my family was divided, and my community had been poisoned against me. Even if I somehow proved my innocence, could I ever rebuild the relationships and trust that had been systematically destroyed? For the first time since Robert's death, I seriously considered giving up. Maybe Derek was right. Maybe I should accept the conservatorship and surrender control of my finances to someone more qualified to manage them. Maybe the fight wasn't worth the toll it was taking on my health, my relationships, and my peace of mind. Maybe being 73 meant accepting limitations and dependencies that I had been too proud to acknowledge. But as I sat there in the darkness, surrounded by evidence of a lifetime spent overcoming challenges and defying expectations, something began to stir deep within me. It was the same fierce determination that had carried me through widowhood, the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had built my business from nothing, the same protective instinct that had motivated me to work multiple jobs to provide for my daughters. Derek had made a crucial mistake in his campaign against me. He had assumed that age automatically equated to weakness, that isolation would lead to surrender, and that psychological pressure would break my spirit. What he failed to understand was that I had survived challenges that would have destroyed weaker people, and that every attack on my dignity only strengthened my resolve to fight back. The darkness that surrounded me wasn't the end of my story. It was the crucible in which my counterattack would be forged. Derek wanted to paint me as a helpless victim of cognitive decline, but he was about to discover that Margaret Thompson had never been anyone's victim. The fight back was about to begin, and this time I wouldn't be fighting alone. The turning point came on a crisp April morning when I made a decision that would change everything. I stopped trying to defend myself against Derek's accusations and started building an offensive strategy to expose his crimes. The shift in mindset was subtle but profound, transforming me from a reactive victim into a proactive investigator determined to uncover the full scope of his deception. My first call was to Michael Rodriguez, a private investigator recommended by James Morrison, who specialized in financial fraud cases. Michael was a former FBI agent in his early 50s, with graying hair and the kind of methodical approach that comes from decades of building criminal cases. When I explained the situation in his downtown office, his expression grew increasingly serious as he recognized the sophisticated nature of Derek's operation. "Mrs. Thompson," Michael said, leaning back in his chair, "what you're describing isn't just elder abuse. It's a complex fraud scheme that involves identity theft, document forgery, and systematic defamation. Your son-in-law is running a long-term con game, and you're not his first target. Let me do some background research on Mr. Chen and see what we can uncover." Within 48 hours, Michael's investigation revealed information that explained everything about Derek's behavior and motivations. Derek Chen wasn't just a struggling real estate agent with expensive tastes. He was a serial financial predator who had targeted vulnerable individuals across 3 different states. Court records from California showed that he had been involved in a similar conservatorship case involving an elderly man whose life savings disappeared shortly after Derek gained legal control of his finances. Even more damning was evidence that Derek's entire lifestyle was built on a foundation of debt and deception. His luxury apartment was 3 months behind on rent, his Tesla was about to be repossessed, and he owed over $200,000 to various creditors. The expensive clothes, fancy restaurants, and lavish vacations that had impressed Sarah were all financed through credit, cards and loans that he had no realistic prospect of repaying. The investigation also revealed that Derek had researched me extensively before pursuing a relationship with Sarah. Michael found evidence that Derek had accessed public records about my business, my property values, and even my late husband's life insurance policies before he ever met my daughter. Sarah wasn't the love of his life. She was simply the most convenient pathway to access my wealth. Armed with this information, I began constructing a comprehensive case that would not only defend against Derek's accusations, but expose him as the criminal he truly was. Working with Michael, James Morrison, and a new attorney named Robert Sullivan, who specialized in elder abuse cases, I developed a multi-pronged strategy designed to turn Derek's own weapons against him. The first step was proving that the evidence Derek had used to support his conservatorship petition was fabricated. Michael's team included a forensic accountant who analyzed the bank statements Derek had provided to Lisa and confirmed that they were sophisticated forgeries. The computer analysis revealed digital artifacts that proved the documents had been created using photo editing software rather than generated by legitimate banking systems. Similarly, the audio recordings that Derek claimed captured my confused conversations were analyzed by a voice recognition expert who confirmed that they had been heavily edited and manipulated. The expert was able to reconstruct the original conversations, proving that Derek had taken innocuous discussions and altered them to create false evidence of cognitive decline. Dr. Harper, my longtime physician, provided crucial medical testimony documenting my excellent physical and mental health. She also revealed that Derek had contacted her office multiple times, claiming to be concerned about my mental state and asking leading questions designed to elicit information he could use to support his accusations. Dr. Harper had found his behavior so inappropriate that she had documented each contact in my medical file. The court-ordered psychological evaluation that had caused me so much anxiety actually worked in my favor. Dr. Chen's report concluded that I showed no signs of cognitive decline, dementia, or any other mental health issues that would justify a conservatorship. More importantly, she noted that the evidence presented by Derek was inconsistent with her direct observations of my cognitive abilities. But our most powerful weapon was Derek's own arrogance and carelessness. Michael's investigation revealed that Derek had made several crucial mistakes that would prove his guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Phone records showed that he had been in contact with the fake charities listed on the forged bank statements, proving his involvement in creating the fabricated evidence. Credit card records revealed that he had purchased photo editing software shortly before the fake documents were created. Most damaging of all was Derek's attempt to access my investment accounts using information he could only have obtained through illegal means. The investment firm's security logs showed multiple failed login attempts using my personal information, all traced back to Derek's computer IP address. These weren't innocent mistakes or coincidental similarities. They were clear evidence of attempted financial fraud. As our case strengthened, I noticed a remarkable change in the people around me. Neighbors who had been avoiding me began stopping by to apologize for doubting my mental faculties. Friends who had distanced themselves called to express regret for believing Derek's lies. Mary Henderson, my closest friend, arrived at my door one evening with tears in her eyes and a homemade apple pie, begging forgiveness for allowing Derek to poison her mind against me. Lisa was the most emotional when she learned the truth about Derek's deception. She arrived at my house on a Saturday morning, threw her arms around me, and sobbed apologies for doubting me. "Mom," she said, "I should have trusted my instincts about him from the beginning. I'm so sorry I let him manipulate me into questioning your competency. You're the strongest, smartest woman I know, and I should never have forgotten that." The reunion with Lisa was particularly meaningful because it restored our partnership in the catering business. Together, we began contacting the clients who had canceled contracts and explaining the situation. Most were horrified to learn that they had been manipulated into doubting my capabilities and immediately reinstated their business relationships. The company that had been nearly destroyed by Derek's sabotage began to recover and rebuild. But the most challenging relationship to repair was with Sarah. When confronted with irrefutable evidence of her husband's crimes, she initially responded with denial and anger. She accused me of fabricating evidence to frame an innocent man and suggested that I was so determined to control her life that I would destroy her marriage to maintain my dominance over the family. It took weeks of patient conversation, supported by overwhelming documentation, before Sarah began to accept the truth about the man she had married. The process was heartbreaking to watch as she grappled with the realization that her husband had never loved her, but had simply used her as a tool to access her mother's wealth. The dreams she had built around their relationship crumbled as she understood the extent of his manipulation and deception. The breakthrough came when Sarah discovered that Derek had been intercepting and reading her personal emails, monitoring her phone calls, and even accessing her bank accounts without permission. The man she thought was her loving partner had been treating her like another mark in his long con game, gathering information and maintaining control through systematic invasion of her privacy. By late June, our legal team felt confident that we had assembled an unshakable case against Derek. The evidence was overwhelming. The documentation was impeccable, and the witnesses were credible. Robert Sullivan, our attorney, advised me that we were ready to file criminal charges and civil lawsuits that would not only protect me from future attacks but ensure that Derek faced serious legal consequences for his actions. The moment had come to shift from defense to offense, from reactive protection to proactive justice. Derek had spent months systematically destroying my reputation and attempting to steal my life savings, confident that his victim was too old, too isolated, and too confused to fight back effectively. He was about to learn that he had gravely underestimated the woman he was trying to destroy. The plan we developed was elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its precision. Rather than simply filing charges and hoping for the best, we decided to confront Derek in the most public and humiliating way possible. We would walk into his office during a busy workday, surrounded by his colleagues and clients, and serve him with criminal charges and civil lawsuits that would expose his crimes to everyone in his professional community. Michael Rodriguez coordinated with the Denver Police Department's white-collar crime unit to ensure that Derek would be arrested immediately after being served with the legal documents. Detective Maria Santos, a veteran investigator with decades of experience in financial fraud cases, confirmed that they had enough evidence to charge Derek with identity theft, attempted fraud, elder abuse, and multiple counts of forgery. The stage was set for a confrontation that would not only vindicate me personally, but send a powerful message to anyone else who might consider targeting elderly individuals for financial exploitation. Derek had chosen the wrong victim, and he was about to face the consequences of his calculated cruelty in the most public way possible. Tuesday, July 15th, 2024, dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect Colorado summer morning that seemed to promise justice and redemption. At exactly 10:30 a.m., I walked through the glass doors of Premier Commercial Realty with James Morrison on my right, Robert Sullivan on my left, and Detective Maria Santos following close behind. The click of my heels on the marble floor echoed through the modern lobby like a drumbeat announcing the arrival of justice. Derek was in the middle of a presentation to potential clients when his receptionist nervously approached his glass-walled conference room. Through the transparent walls, I could see his confident smile freeze as she whispered something in his ear. His head turned toward the lobby, and when his eyes met mine, the color drained from his face so completely that he looked like he might faint. The moment Derek excused himself from his meeting and walked toward us, Robert Sullivan stepped forward with a leather portfolio containing enough legal documents to end Derek's criminal career forever. "Derek Chen," Robert announced in a voice that carried across the entire office. "You are being served with criminal charges for elder abuse, financial fraud, identity theft, and multiple counts of forgery. You are also being served with a civil lawsuit seeking damages in excess of $500,000. The transformation in Derek's demeanor was immediate and complete. The smooth, confident man who had spent months gaslighting me and manipulating my family suddenly looked like a cornered animal. His usual polished appearance seemed shabby under the harsh fluorescent lights, and his designer suit couldn't disguise the panic in his eyes as he realized that his carefully constructed lies were collapsing around him. "This is obviously some kind of misunderstanding," Derek stammered. his voice lacking the authoritative tone he had used to intimidate me for months. "Mrs. Thompson is clearly confused about the situation. I've been trying to help her manage her finances because she's been showing signs of dementia." Detective Santos stepped forward with her badge displayed prominently. "Mr. Chen, we have extensive evidence of your criminal activities, including computer forensics proving that you forged bank documents, phone records showing your communication with fraudulent charities, and security footage of you attempting to access Mrs. Thompson's accounts without authorization. You have the right to remain silent." The arrest that followed was witnessed by Derek's entire office, including his supervisor, his colleagues, and the clients he had been trying to impress moments earlier. As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, I felt a profound sense of vindication that went beyond personal satisfaction. This wasn't just about my individual case. It was about demonstrating that elderly individuals are not helpless victims waiting to be exploited by predators. The immediate aftermath of Derek's arrest was a whirlwind of media attention that transformed my personal story into a public cautionary tale about elder abuse. Local news stations picked up the story of the 73-year-old woman who had outsmarted a sophisticated con artist, and within days, I was receiving calls from reporters across the country who wanted to discuss the broader implications of financial crimes against seniors. Sarah's reaction to her husband's arrest was a complex mixture of relief, embarrassment, and profound sadness. The marriage she had believed in was revealed to be a complete fabrication, and the man she thought she loved had never existed beyond Derek's carefully crafted persona. During the divorce proceedings that followed, we discovered that Derek had accumulated over $300,000 in debt using Sarah's credit and personal information. The legal resolution of Derek's case was swift and decisive. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, he accepted a plea agreement that resulted in a 5-year prison term and an order to pay full restitution for all damages caused by his criminal activities. The Colorado Attorney General's office used his case as an example in their statewide campaign to educate seniors about financial fraud prevention. More satisfying than Derek's punishment was the restoration of my reputation and relationships throughout the community. The friends who had distanced themselves returned with genuine apologies and renewed respect for my resilience. The clients who had canceled their catering contracts not only reinstated their business, but recommended Thompson's Catering to their friends and colleagues. Dr. Harper, my physician, asked if she could use my case as an example in her presentations to medical conferences about recognizing and combating elder abuse. The combination of medical documentation, legal advocacy, and personal determination that had defeated Derek's scheme became a model for other professionals working with vulnerable populations. James Morrison, my accountant, implemented new security protocols based on our experience that he began offering to all his elderly clients. The systematic documentation and professional collaboration that had been crucial to my vindication became a template for protecting other seniors from similar predatory schemes. But the most meaningful change was in my relationship with my daughters. The crisis had initially divided our family, but working together to expose Derek's crimes had ultimately strengthened our bonds in ways that might never have developed under normal circumstances. Lisa and I became true partners in running Thompson's Catering, and Sarah emerged from her ordeal with a newfound appreciation for the wisdom and strength she had inherited from her mother. The investigation had also revealed that Derek had attempted similar schemes against at least 3 other elderly individuals in different states. Working with federal authorities, we were able to provide evidence that helped those victims recover their stolen assets and see their abusers prosecuted. My case became part of a larger pattern that demonstrated the sophisticated and widespread nature of elder financial abuse. 6 months after Derek's arrest, I received a letter from the Colorado Department of Human Services asking if I would be willing to serve on a statewide task force developing new protocols for investigating elder abuse cases. The irony was perfect. The same agency that Derek had tried to use against me was now asking for my expertise in protecting other seniors from similar attacks. The transformation in my daily life was profound and lasting. The morning routine that had once been clouded by anxiety and self-doubt was now infused with purpose and confidence. The business that Derek had nearly destroyed was thriving beyond my wildest expectations, with new clients specifically seeking us out because of the integrity and resilience we had demonstrated during the crisis. My investment portfolio, which Derek had tried so desperately to access, continued growing under my careful management. The $850,000 he had coveted became nearly $1 million through continued smart investing and the business growth that followed our vindication. The money that Derek thought would be easy to steal was now more secure than ever, protected by enhanced security measures and managed by a woman who had proven her competency beyond any doubt. The house in the Highlands neighborhood where Derek had conducted his manipulative family dinners became a gathering place for a new kind of family celebration. Sunday dinners resumed with a renewed sense of gratitude and connection, free from the toxic influence that had nearly destroyed our relationships. The dining room table that had witnessed so much deception now hosted honest conversations and genuine laughter. Most importantly, the experience had taught me that age is not a liability, but an asset when it comes with wisdom, determination, and the accumulated strength of a lifetime spent overcoming challenges. Derek had assumed that being 73 meant being vulnerable, but I had proven that experience and intelligence are more powerful than youth and deception. As I reflect on this transformative experience from the comfort of my restored life, I'm struck by how profoundly it changed not just my circumstances, but my understanding of strength, resilience, and the power of refusing to accept injustice. The elderly woman who Derek thought would be an easy target became the architect of his downfall, and the family he tried to destroy emerged stronger and more united than ever before. The first and most crucial lesson from this ordeal is that age should never be mistaken for weakness or vulnerability. Society often portrays elderly individuals as frail, confused, and dependent, creating a dangerous stereotype that predators like Derek exploit to justify their criminal behavior. But wisdom, experience, and accumulated knowledge are formidable weapons against deception. And underestimating older adults is a mistake that Derek learned too late. The second vital lesson is the importance of trusting your instincts when something feels wrong, even when others try to convince you that you're being paranoid or oversensitive. From the moment Derek entered our family, my intuition warned me that his motivations were suspect, but I allowed social pressure and my daughter's happiness to override those concerns. Learning to honor your gut feelings while also gathering concrete evidence is a skill that can protect you from many forms of manipulation. Documentation proved to be absolutely critical in building a case against Derek's systematic deception. Without the detailed records that James Morrison helped me maintain, the photographs of financial statements, and the careful notation of every suspicious interaction, Derek's sophisticated lies might have prevailed over the truth. In any situation involving potential fraud or abuse, creating a paper trail is essential for both protection and eventual justice. The power of professional allies cannot be overstated in situations like these. Dr. Harper's medical documentation, James Morrison's financial expertise, Michael Rodriguez's investigative skills, and Robert Sullivan's legal knowledge created a network of support that Derek could not overcome with charm and manipulation alone. Building relationships with trustworthy professionals before you need them is an investment that can pay enormous dividends during times of crisis. Perhaps most importantly, this experience taught me that isolation is a predator's most powerful weapon, while community support is a victim's greatest defense. Derek's strategy depended on separating me from my friends, family, and professional relationships so that his version of events would go unchallenged. When I stopped trying to handle the situation alone and started building a coalition of allies, the balance of power shifted decisively in my favor. The impact of this experience extends far beyond my personal vindication. The media attention generated by Derek's arrest helped raise awareness about elder financial abuse throughout Colorado and beyond. The protocols we developed for documenting and investigating these crimes have been adopted by law enforcement agencies and social service organizations across the country. More personally, the crisis revealed reserves of strength and determination that I didn't know I possessed. At 73, I discovered that I was capable of conducting a sophisticated investigation, building a complex legal case, and standing up to intimidation that would have challenged people half my age. The experience was transformative in ways that have enriched every aspect of my life since then. Sarah's recovery from Derek's psychological manipulation has been remarkable to witness. The daughter who once doubted my mental capabilities now calls me regularly for advice on everything from financial planning to relationship decisions. The ordeal taught her to value the wisdom that comes with experience, and to be more skeptical of people who seem too good to be true. Lisa's partnership in our catering business has flourished in ways that might never have developed without the crisis that forced us to work together as equals. The business that Derek tried to destroy is now more successful than ever, with a reputation for integrity and resilience that attracts clients who value those qualities above everything else. The Sunday family dinners that Derek once used as opportunities for manipulation have become celebrations of authentic connection and mutual respect. The dining room where he planted seeds of doubt now hosts conversations filled with honesty, laughter, and the kind of genuine affection that his presence had poisoned for so long. For anyone facing similar challenges, I want to emphasize that fighting back is always possible, regardless of your age or circumstances. Derek's scheme succeeded initially because he understood the systems designed to protect elderly individuals and learned to manipulate them for his own purposes. But those same systems, when properly activated by knowledgeable allies, become powerful tools for justice and protection. The legal protections available to seniors are extensive and effective when properly utilized. Elder abuse laws carry serious criminal penalties, and civil remedies can provide both financial compensation and future protection. The key is understanding that these resources exist and knowing how to access them through qualified attorneys who specialize in elder law. Community awareness is growing about these issues, but we must continue educating people about the warning signs of elder financial abuse. Family members who suddenly become very interested in an older relative's finances, professionals who discourage seniors from consulting with independent advisors, and anyone who tries to isolate elderly individuals from their support networks should be viewed with suspicion. Technology can be both a tool for predators and a weapon for victims. Derek used computer software to create fake documents, but digital forensics also provided the evidence that proved his guilt. Learning to protect yourself online while also understanding how technology can support your case is increasingly important in our connected world. The most profound lesson from this entire experience is that dignity and autonomy are worth fighting for at any age. Derek's ultimate goal wasn't just to steal my money. It was to rob me of my independence and reduce me to a helpless dependent under his control. Refusing to accept that fate, regardless of the challenges involved, was a choice that defined not just the outcome of this specific crisis, but my entire sense of self-worth moving forward. As I finish sharing this story with you, I want to emphasize that strength comes in many forms, and age brings wisdom that cannot be replicated through youth or education alone. The 73-year-old woman who walked into Derek's office with her lawyer and accountant was not the same person who had first welcomed him into her family 3 years earlier. The transformation forged in the crucible of his deception created someone stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. If you found value in this story of transformation and justice, I encourage you to share it with others who might benefit from these lessons. Please subscribe to our channel, leave a comment about your own experiences with overcoming challenges, and remember that it's never too late to fight for what's right. Your age is not a limitation. It's an accumulation of strength, wisdom, and resilience that no predator can overcome when properly channeled toward justice and truth.